Watching it again for this little ditty, I reminded there is something uniquely British about Star Cops. Created by Chris Boucher, fresh off Doctor Who, and still brimming with ideas, Star Cops arrived in 1987. I remember the first time I saw it, and I looked at the front cover of the Radio Times. An Instinct for Murder, for example. An Instinct for Murder introduced Nathan Spring is introduced as a policeman who doesn't want to be there, but doesn't particularly like space and certainly doesn't think policing orbit is a glamorous assignment. Calder later said he played Spring as someone who views space just as another unpleasant posting, grounding the character. The plot itself was about globalization, which is a topic of today, and the space race, of us bursting out into the stars. Now, who was going to get there and how much will it cost? More integrally, it was about murder to get the surfing contract of like spare backpacks away from the Russian dominance, international tensions and internal politics. The quip Calder would later make into Space Commissioner about that. He said, "Have you ever been to space, Gerard?"
I'll try to make sure you get a reliable backpack.
Creator Chris Boucher has since said that the guiding principle was simple. This isn't about space, he said. It's about people who work in space. The mindset runs through every episode, every conversation, every scene, every moment where the show resolutely resolves to dazzle you with spectacle. From the onset, David Calder's Nathan Spring sets the tone. Spring isn't thrilled to be in space. He doesn't eat with awe, and certainly doesn't view his posting as glamorous. Calder has said he deliberately praised Spring as a man who regards space as an inconvenience rather than a miracle. The first episode unfolds like a grumpy induction into orbital policing, with murder treated not as cosmic mystery but as logistical nightmare. It's pointed out to him by his commander that the commander of the International Space Police Force should know the difference to these two things, to which he responds,
Maybe they've chosen the wrong man for the job.
But Conversation for the Dead, however, is set largely on the space station, with Spring desperately trying to scavenge new recruits badly. When his girlfriend is killed so that the security forces of England can access the American base to see what's inside, and get Spring mad to facilitate things get even more complicated. Nathan's outrage that he wouldn't kill the agent because of his morality only furthers the character's development, and we see the relationship between David through build, as he says,
I haven't got any principles.
The eeriness seems to a large extent to be from Spring's girlfriend's untimely death at the hands of his own governmental agents. It leans heavily into the isolation on behalf of Spring and centered around Trevor Cooper's Colin Davis as he attempts to circumvent Spring's authority on Earth. Cooper's performance is one of the most unsettling things the BBC has ever smuggled into early evening slot. And the episode ends rather playfully as Davis states that
Last time I looked up at the stars, something nasty dropped in my eye.
The next episode, Intelligent Listening for Beginners, is where Star Cops really feels like a proper ensemble show, introducing Linda Newton's pal Kenzie. Now, in this one, Newton later described Kenzie as competent without being flashy. It is outlined perfectly by the commander of Outpost 9, who is a tech developer like Spring's father was, who is developing listening devices that will set off explosions after discovering specific messages to his victims. He's testing it, basically. He develops this device with specific honor to his father. There is a chemical plant that gets affected, then the Channel Tunnel. Later it would be the commander's own Base 9. Spring periodically mentions that his father will recognize him as a pathetic failure. Behind the scenes, the episode reportedly went through several script revisions to balance the character work with plot mechanics. Linda Newton's pal Kenzie arrives as a character defined by competence rather than swagger, something Newton later said was a conscious relief. She wasn't asked to run around or prove myself or anything. Now, Eric Ray Evans' David Through, meanwhile, is an idealism person, and he's into regulation, a man who generally believes in the system. David Through, its promotion only fuels the fire of Davis, who resents the demotion.
Don't you patronize me, you supercilious bastard!
Though Trivial Games of Paranoid Pursuits, which is the next episode, tracks corporate influence, legal ambiguity, and the terrifying idea that the justice in space might be entirely negotiable. The American base commander says that you British have always been naive where those Russians are concerned, referring to them as commies. Calder later remarked that the episodes like this felt closer to the Sweeney than Star Trek. Eric Ray Evans was earthbound in this episode predominantly, and he often joked that Frew would be insufferable in real life, but acknowledged that his moral ambiguity and rigidity was essential. A notable point was when they had to use suburban England as a substitute for New England America in some scenes, but where Nathan refers to the Americans as...
They looked up the word international, found out that it didn't just mean Americans.
The inclusion of a new Russian base commander at the end of the episode's climax underlines this point. With the next episode, this case to be opened a million years, it's not about aliens, but about belief, paranoia, and humanity's tendency to mythologize the unknown. It centers around nuclear waste and the illegality of using the moon as a jumping ground. Yet again, we are forced to reconcile with the events which were contemporary to 90s, 80s England. The devastation of the Sellafield nuclear plant being a case in point. Calder has said he was one of his favourites to film, largely because it let the characters breathe and react like professionals confronted with nonsense they still have to take seriously. Behind the scenes, the episode reportedly delighted Bodger, who enjoyed subversing the audience expectations and poking fun at classic sci-fi tropes. The result is a lighter chapter that still reinforces the show's core theme. The episode focuses on accountability, responsibility, and the uncomfortable reality that justice in space may be shaped more by the economics than ethics. Calder has spoken openly about how much he enjoyed Spring being pushed into compromise, saying he's not a hero, he's a professional trying not to make things worse. Linda Newton echoed this statement, noting that the scripts increasingly ask the characters to sit with failure rather than overcome it. That felt very adult. The sequence where Colin Davis intervenes when Kenzie is caught entrapping the culprit of the nuclear fly tipping is most notable when he reflects his heroism with
Come inside me, sport.
the story warmer in the blood, however, turns inward, interrogating its own authority structure and moral compasses required to keep order in orbit. Written by Doctor Who alum Philip Martin and introducing Seo Anaba as a new member of the team, Anna Shun, it centers around a Japanese corporation, Hanimed, that's employing dubious techniques to trial their new drug that combats space sickness. It ultimately leads to being freeze-dried in perpetuity. The premise being that when an infected person's body temperature reaches a certain body temperature, the drug takes effect. Now, the disappearance of Christina Janssen, a friend of Alex Kurenko's, the base commander, at this point sends the team into action, and it transpires that she intrinsically linked to the Hanimed company. Space in Star Cops is not a frontier. It's a workplace hazard. The interlude with Davis on the exercise deck is yet another example of humorous bond formed by the team when Nathan screams,
I thought I told you not to do that in here!
Now, A Double Life, the next episode, places Spring in an ethically murky territory, forcing him to choose between institutional loyalty and personal conscience. Calder has spoken about how much he enjoyed these moments, where Spring's the cynicism cracks just enough to revel deeply held principles. As such, the key premise of the story is that the prime suspect is a cohort pianist who has a twin who actually has stolen the offending sperm. The contrast between the actual culprit, Albie, and his innocent piano-playing brother is the primary focus behind the strip. Now, production anecdotes suggest this episode was particularly challenging for pacing, with long dialogue scenes that required absolute precision from the cast and director. Eric Ray Evans later joked that Through would have been happier if everyone simply followed the rules, while Newton relished Kenzie's growing confidence within the team. Behind the scenes, the episode stretched the production to its limits, with ambitious blocking and repeated use of sets to imply movement around vast distances. It's a reminder that the constraint often breeds creativity, even if it also breeds BBC memos. Again, Davis is the most anecdotal moments in this episode, with his abrupt summation of the theft being down to the silly bitch keeping the eggs on the moon in the first place. Though there is some interesting dialogue between James Bannerman, the brother, and the prime suspect, and David Threw is the former confines him to his home, and the interplay between Anna and Colin is depicted as getting more fonder.
I've got a handkerchief, but it's in my top pocket.
We look at other people's secrets now, which is the next episode. One of my favourites, really. It focuses on the great breakup of the society on the moon, rather than any intrinsic investigation tropes. The episode's title alone signals that its thematic ambition, and the script leans heavily into the idea that space is indifferent to human error. Calder described filming the episode as emotionally draining, given its focus on preventable tragedy rather than criminal malice. The movement of Kenzie's character and Spring, who sees the intrinsic depths of the two characters within each other, and allows a very realistic interpretation of their potential romance, in my opinion. The story focuses on international politics of obsession with the psychological damage of isolation. Damage is being caused to the moon base, with things sorting out and exploding everywhere. This results in the chief commissioner of Moonbase being called to oversee investigations, and it turns out to be him in the first place. A friend of Kovenko, Wolfhart ends the episode reflecting on his age and mortality of being alone in space.
Wolfhart. He must have been bloody bonkers.
Now, the last one, Little Green Men and Other Martian, comes around as the final transmitted episode, and it's a banger. Despite the fact that Eric Ray Evans is not in this time around at all due to illness, it knocks it out of the park, as they say in postmodern terms. The team have finally found themselves bound together properly, and we see Newton's character and Calder's bonding even further, presumably to crack into a budding thing in Series 2, should that have happened. The plot ran around finding a Martian artifact that was supposed to be the creation of an ancient civilization. There was altercation between the old friend of Kenzie's, who was a reporter hack trying to get the scoop on the story, and in the end it turned out to be simply the museum on Earth who wanted to create an illusion to get the rights to the Martian contract that consisted of an old man artifact that nobody had ever seen. The plan was to store it on board a flight to Mars and destroy the freighter before it even got there, so creating a myth that could be exploited for publicity purposes. Ironically, Nathan was also going to Mars to set up a Starcop office there. Nathan survived his proposed death to Kenzie's delight, and Box had recorded the image of the artifact that broke the case. Nathan's supposed death at the end would have been a shock on the proverbial noggin, though we are generally pleased that it doesn't come to pass. There are no grand resolutions, no triumphant victories, just the sense that the job continues, imperfect and unglamorous. Calder has remarked that the ending felt honest, even if it wasn't the future the cast or Botcher had hoped for. Production anecdotes confirm that by this point everyone knew the show was unlikely to continue, leading the final scenes a subdued poignancy. It's an ending that frustrates some viewers, but for some others it perfectly encapsulates the series' commitment to realism over a reassurance. Star Cops was cancelled after one series. Its show, pace and adult tone deemed unsuitable for broader audiences. Even Chris Boucher had an outline for a proposed new series featuring the setting up of the Star Cop office on Mars.
Anyone from Mars?
I watched them regularly, and many might describe it today as a guilty secret. My guilty secret, I must say. Those who watched it found it long and laborious at the time, though. But as Spring said to his trusty pocket computer, very much like today's mobile.
That's what life tends to be.
Give us a good clicking.
Shakanaka.